It's 8:30. God damn it. There we go. We're live. We're live on YouTube. We are gonna be live on LinkedIn in a second. And then we're gonna text everybody on WhatsApp. And then we will begin the show that we deserve. The show that we deserve. The show that makes everything worth it. The show of all shows. The show that informs us, inspires us. There we go. There we go. Good, good. Now let's just put it out on WhatsApp, folks. Just 1 second. Send the message to people on WhatsApp. And there we go. (203rd episode). Yeah. There we go on WhatsApp. And ready. Ready. We are ready. Now let me wait for a few seconds for some people to join in. Live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube. Send the message to people on WhatsApp. And here we go. Correcto. Good morning, says Mr. Eastic.in _in. Good morning, good morning. I guess you can hear me. So if you can hear me, let's begin. The show that we deserve. Bum bum bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We're working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, well, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, our weekly mental workout, a weekly dose of insights and analysis that don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines, things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go. Oh, but before we go, you gotta follow a tradition, right? You know the tradition. You know the sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. We'll all sip something together, and it'll bring us good luck, as it always does, without fail, every day. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a cup or mug, a glass, a tank, a chalice, a stein, a canteen jug, a flask, or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. I like some hot water with black pepper in it. And here we go. My God, it's beautiful. Let's do it again. So nice. So nice. I could feel your sip, guys. Good job on the synchronicity. Really nice. It's beautiful. Before we begin, let's pay a tribute to Scott Adams, sir. Scott Adams, the legendary creator of Dilbert, uh, extraordinary political analyst, greatest writer of terrific books like How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Bigly, Lose a Thing, God's Debris, Dilbert Principle, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the creator of Coffee with Scott Adams and the simultaneous sip. This concept of simultaneous sip came from him. He's no more. He lived a great life. He had an amazing life. But as he lived, he taught the world how to die. You know, if you noticed how he passed on, he announced that he was dealing with this disease about 250 days ago, right? Not 250, 200, yeah, somewhere around 250 days ago. That's when I started Thinker's Frequency, when I first heard that he was going through this disease. After he fell through the disease, he kept sharing his updates. He kept everything in order. He literally uh, died doing the show. So essentially, he passed 20 minutes before the last Coffee with Scott Adams, and he said, I just wish I could muster up enough courage to do another show. And it's just extraordinary how he inspired people even as he was passing on. So it wasn't as if he was passing on and he had something held on. No, he kept public conversations with people he liked, and as somebody who's passing on his knowledge. So he left books, he left Dilbert, the greatest, funniest comic, right? Office environment stuff, immortalized. And then, as he passed on, in the last message, in the final message of his, he said, just be useful. That's the legacy I want. If my works benefited you at all, I'd request you to pass it on as best as you can. That'll be my legacy, right? So be useful. That is so nice. That is so inspiring, so beautiful. How you can essentially shape your life in a way that even if, as you pass on, people love you, people miss you, people feel sad, but people, more than that, feel inspired to live on a better life. Be useful is such a good mantra, right? Be useful. And that's what he said. And a lot of people, like including Donald Trump, uh, greatest of, political analysts, businessmen, Elon Musk, Mr. Elon Musk posted a tribute. Everybody, essentially, everybody was touched by the work Scott Adams sir did. In fact, Elon Musk has a management principle. It's called Dilbert filter. He says, don't come to meetings with anything which can be a Dilbert comic, right? So that was one of his management principles. And it's just extraordinary how it has shaped up all from everything from management to politics to thinking models. A lot of things to learn from him. And in his honor, we hold this simultaneous sip, folks. Let's do it. Rest in peace, Scott Adams, sir. Anybody who wants to read good books, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, Lose a Think, Reframe Your Brain, Dilbert's Principle, God's Debris, great books, right? And let's move on, folks. Let's be useful, right? Such a beautiful mantra. So here I try to be useful to you all. No tax exemption for Tiger Global on Flipkart's stake sale, says Supreme Court. This is a big landmark case. If you don't know about it, I'll tell you. This is what you come to me for, right? This is a very, very important case. So Tiger Global, as you know, had sold Flipkart sales, right? Flipkart's stake for $16 billion in 2000, back in 2016, 19 was it, right? So for 77%, $16 billion, right? And that transaction was routed through Tiger's subsidiary in Mauritius, right? And Mauritius has a tax treaty in India, with India, which is basically a double tax anti-avoidance DTAA treaty, which helps people to essentially not get taxed doubly, right? And so that treaty was essentially the cornerstone of this particular case, where it was to be judged whether 14,500 crores should be paid to the tax authorities of India as Tiger Global sells its stake in Flipkart. Right? So this case had been dragging on. Uh, And in the High Court had essentially ruled in Tiger Global's favor, saying that they don't need to pay tax because this particular thing had been grandfathered. There's a concept called grandfathering. Grandfathering is when an entity has a particular subsidiary, and that subsidiary operates and the transaction, and this particular deal had been grandfathered and was under the Mauritian and Indian trade treaty, which was tax exempt. So this they don't need to pay tax. That was High Court's ruling. But the Indian government went to the Supreme Court and said this is not, this is basically uh, what can you call it, an abuse of the treaty, right? It's an abuse of the treaty. That's what the government claim, and Supreme Court has essentially agreed with the government, and they have said that the benefits of India Mauritius DTAA don't apply as 2018 deal designed to avoid tax. Now, how did they come out saying that it was designed to avoid tax? Designed to avoid tax means that Tiger LLC, the group Tiger Group, essentially is in US, and now they have a Mauritian entity. But everything was happening in US, the operations, the decision making, everything. So Mauritian entity was essentially only to get the tax benefits of the treaty, right? So that basically essentially becomes a front. Now, that was the technical play. Is it a front? How can you call it a front? Let's say if you have 15 employees there who do some sort of tax accounting and so on and so forth, would you still call it a fund? Would decisions uh, uh, that are being made, would those decisions or keeping of those decisions or framing of those decisions happening in that office make it not a front? So that was the question. But essentially, it's become very clear, and this is going to be a very big benchmark or a landmark for how India essentially takes a look at these tax treaties and how these treaties can be used in the future to avoid tax, right? So this particular deal is a very, very big deal. This lays the future for VC and private equity transactions, right? No longer would the grandfathering thing work. No longer would the tax avoidance using a tax haven like Mauritius at least work. This is very similar to the case which Jane Street also had. Now, this is very different in a way that this is particularly related to an investment and the exit of it. Jane Street was essentially also investment, but micro transactions, like small and very quick HFT, high frequency trades, right? In Jane Street's case as well, if you remember, the case was whether Singapore or Mauritian entity, which Jane Street had, which was taking all the money. So Jane Street had a structure where the foreign entity was making all the money, and the Indian entity was losing all the money, right? So they were essentially making $4 billion in a couple of years, right? But they were paying no tax because all the money that was made on the foreign entities, right? So entities have had cornered it and said this is basically avoidance, right? Now, this particular case will also have uh, an implication on the Jane Street fiasco. So let's see how that plays out. It's going to be very interesting. Uh, Mr. Abhishek Sharma says, "Well, if this is legal, then there should not be any issue. This was loophole and they exploited legally." Well, Mr. Abhishek Sharma, they tried, or so they thought. You could say, or so they thought. This was allowed, but under certain restrictions, right? So let's say if you have a tax haven and you create a shell entity there, where it's basically no decision making. It would have been fine if they essentially had country heads or something of that sort who coordinated with the Indian entities as the representatives of the fund manager, but they didn't do that, right? So they didn't invest anything, and they got a trade benefit because of the tax structures, and that is essentially not going to work out. So it's not legal anymore, and it wasn't legal. It was just barely legal, right? So how do lawyers make money when things are barely legal? So this was barely legal, and it was basically a very big deal which has gotten sorted. So the 14,500 crores, 1.6 billion dollars, right? Uh, in capital gains arising from the sale of shares after 2017 were taxable in India under the Income Tax Act, right? The High Court overturned the 2020 decision in favor of Tiger Global, and then uh, Supreme Court came along. Makes sense. So that's a very, very important decision on how this has been framed. Let's see what happens to the Jane Street case. So the next thing is the Jane Street play, right? Jane Street verdict should get affected by this directly or indirectly, and that case is also going to drag on for some time. So let's see how it operates, right? Uh, Moving on, folks. I'm sorry, I got something stuck in my. Yeah, now I'm good. How to say been there, done that with a coffee maker? Imported brewing machines are newest flaunt and some spending lacks. So, imported brewing machines are gaining traction in home and restaurant markets in India. I know it personally because I am friends with a guy who imports these machines, right, from Europe and so on and so forth. So these machines are growing in numbers when it comes to India. 4,20,000 to 4,50,000 units were sold in 2025, compared with 1,85,000 in 2019. So that's a lot of growth, you can imagine, right? Uh, Bulk of sales come from entry to mid segment, priced at 15,000 rupees, right? 2 lakh premium automatic model sales at 2 lakh. So this is gonna be competing with Cafe Coffee Day primarily because those guys white label these machines, right? So they're obviously not manufacturers of it, but Cafe Coffee Day is a very big vendor of coffee machines, both as a renter and as a sales company. So let's see how this plays out. So the Cafe Coffee Day model, as you know, it the change didn't work out, right? The change didn't work out at all. The change just took on a lot of debt. They couldn't make money. As is the case with every coffee chain, they're not making money. It's not worked out for any of them. So it didn't make money. But what Cafe Coffee Day ended up doing well was the whole B2B segment, where it supplied the coffee machines and the whole maintenance contract of it, right? So the AMC thing, annual maintenance contract, that worked out very well for Cafe Coffee Day. And it seems like that's going to get affected with this new line of business opening up, right? So Versuni, SMEG, or DeLonghi, now the centerpiece of the pantry or living room, are part coffee maker, part art piece. So obviously it has some these Italian machines and so on and so forth. They have some what do you call it? Aesthetic value as well. So let's move on, folks. Tariffs drag export growth in December. Overall shipments up 1.9% amid trade diversification. Electronics pharma lead charge. After 41-month high in November, the growth has sort of, basically been tapered off in December. That's to be expected. Nobody should consider it as a surprise. This was on card because these things have a pipeline, right? And this is a part of that pipeline. Indian goods trade deficit widened to 25 billion in December from 20 billion a year ago as export growth slowed to 1.9%, right? US declined by 1.8 uh, to 6.9 billion under the 50% tariffs regime, right? So India's overall outbound shipments rose 1.9 to 38.5 billion in December amidst everything. In the meanwhile, China essentially gained $1.2 trillion with the exports, right? Chinese exports are killing it, $3.6 trillion in exports, about 30% profits for the country. So China is really kicking it. India is figuring things out. India also has a lot of deals to sign when it comes to trade deals. So India is also talking to British Columbia, which is a province in Canada. Then India is of course talking to US. They say virtually these calls are happening, and the deals will be finalized very soon. Then of course there is other countries in the fray, right? In the midst of everything, in the midst of all the geopolitical turmoil, Indian economy is obviously looking good, pretty good, right? World Bank has uh, upgraded Indian economy's growth rate prospects to 7.2%. And it's all good news when it comes to Indian economy because the inflation has sort of, been tapered out. It's 2.3%, 2.6%. The target is 4%, right? After everything that was happening in the inflation, India was going through a deflationary zone, right? The wholesale price index and everything, it was going in a deflationary mode. Now the prices are going back slightly up, which is important, right? uh, and now India is looking at whether it should go with a rate cut or it should hold rates. The news is that it's going to hold rates because inflation is pretty much in control and the growth rate is going to stabilize. So whenever interest rates are fiddled with, the banking sector sort of gets rocked a little, right? Which is what's happening with the Indian banking sector right now. So if you look at the Indian banking, right, the 2025 first half was very bad, and we started Thinkers Frequency somewhere in the early mid of 2025, and we told you that this is gonna be bad, and towards the end, Indian banking is gonna get okay, right? And Indian banking got okay, but then came another rate cut. Now, what happens with rate cuts is that the bond markets, change, the credit to deposit ratios change, the liquidity, adjustment facility has needs to move, right? There are some liquidity surpluses and constraints, right? Cash crunches and so on and so forth. Then, of course, whatever is happening with dollar market and the gold market, so it rocks the boat, and it did rock the boat. And the net interest margins, which were sort of getting stabilized, they got hit again. So now they're gonna be back in the next quarter, 2026, somewhere in the second quarter, the first quarter end. So that's what's gonna happen with banking right now. The banking industry is looking at a credit to deposit ratio, which is called the CD ratio of 81.75%, right? So it should be at around 80%. 81.75% means that for every 100 rupees in deposits, 81.5% is getting lent, right? Which is not cool, because if you look at banks and how they operate, out of the 100 bucks, some money is for the statutory requirements, right? Some 15 bucks. So I'll tell you the split of the entire banking play. It's very interesting. But the point is that Indian bankings is going through a concern where people are not, the deposits are essentially in trouble and the CD ratios are getting hit. So I'll tell you 81.7%, right? The 100 rupee, out of every 100 rupee that comes to deposits, banks set aside 3 rupees for cash reserve requirement, okay, which is called CRR, cash reserve ratio, 3 rupees, 18 rupees for statutory reserves, and 3 to 5 in additional government securities to comply with liquidity coverage rules. So that's the statutory plus liquidity coverage plus CR credit reserve and so on and so forth. So 3 rupees plus 18 rupees plus 3 to 5 rupees. So you can imagine what, 23, 25 bucks, right? Now, after all these allocations, the amount available for lending works out to be at 75 to 76 rupees, okay? The elevated CD ratio reflects challenges in mobilizing deposits as investors seek higher returns elsewhere, right? So that's what. So banks are saying that you should involve the bonds when you're calculating the CD ratio, right? So banks have asked RBI to include bond borrowings in the CD ratio, which would bring it down to 80%. But for now, the CD ratio is a bit high, 81.75%. So this banking thing is going to stabilize in the next quarter or so. Till then, you can expect some shocks here and there, right? But otherwise, it's pretty cool. Indian economy really kicking in. In the last episode of Thinkers Frequency, we talked about how gold and silver could be in trouble now that America has taken over Venezuela. And since America has taken over Venezuela, it's going to be easy for America to essentially wean off the dollar crisis, right? The de-dollarization trend. which has been going on with America, it seemed like America is not going to be facing that problem for a very long time because, first of all, American tech is going to have a very, very good next year, right? And then, of course, a lot of its debt could be serviced well if it got access to $17 trillion worth of oil reserves, right? So that was the idea, that would gold and silver lose their shine when it comes to uh, because gold and silver, gold essentially is a proxy for what? Global geopolitical instability, global financial meltdown possibility. It's basically a hedge against global risks, right? Now it seemed like gold and silver would be uh, tapering down because the global financial system seems robust. However, those that thought was pretty much extinguished or stultified when it came to gold and silver prices, right? Because they kept rising, and the Venezuelan concerns, the peace or the oil reserves were basically offset by whatever happened in Iran and whatever is happening in Russia and Ukraine and Israel and everywhere else. So it doesn't seem like gold and silver would get any respite because of Venezuelan takeover of by America, right? Everything is still very confusing, very perplexing when it comes to geopolitics. So if you look at the Greenland situation, Europeans have literally placed military on Greenland uh, as a response to American interests on the island. So it's very weird. Gold and silver are not pausing, and they are still, moving on for two reasons. So Venezuelan oil reserves are not sweet grade oil reserves; they are sour grade oil reserves, and sour grade oil reserves would require a lot of investments from, uh, you know, uh, US companies. And those, it's to be seen how that situation unfolds. If that situation unfolds in a way which is favorable to America, we will indeed see dollar getting strengthened, right? And if it gets strengthened and its prospects over time for long term get strengthened, it's possible that we'll see gold retreating, but that's not happening right now. Mr. Abhishek Sharma writes, but even after gold and silver continue to rise, that's correct. I was also hoping the rally to stop, maybe because of Iran, it didn't happen. And also because everything is not reality TV, right? So even if uh, Donald Trump could capture Maduro and, you know, display him as a prisoner of the United States, that's reality TV. The world isn't reality TV, right? It's gonna be seen how US companies make investments in Venezuela and how those investments essentially pan out for US. Do they start making money, right? Does that money start hitting the US exchequer? How does that pan out? And that's gonna be a wait and watch kind of a game, right? So if that pans, I would think if that pans for US, I would think the gold rally would essentially look at a stop. But for now, it's all cool. Silver is gaining. It's almost unbelievable whatever is happening, right? Especially with the Greenland situation. So, Indian IT, by the way, when we're talking about AI and everything, right? Indian IT is looking at slightly better prospects. They say that AI based efficiencies are being passed on to create more projects. They basically will be getting an opportunity to make more money because whatever we save when it comes to AI billing, it's gonna come down and lead to more billing because they'll try to use that saved budget on something else. So people were thinking that AI would essentially reduce their revenue top line. They're saying that it doesn't. They're going to be deploying that money elsewhere. That's their reading of the situation. With the labor codes, however, the profitability of these IT companies got hit. TCS, Infosys, HCL, they all declined their net profits declined by about 8 to 9%, right? But the revenue guidance of Infosys is about 3 to 3.5%. HCL, TCS are looking at pivoting TCS, as you know, has already invested in data centers. They say we're going to be very heavy on data centers. HCL is also looking at AI based services and even hardware. So it's very, very interesting whatever is happening in IT. It's starting to look a little green, but obviously every bit of uh, risk that existed earlier still exists. It's just cans getting kicked down the road, right? So let's see what happens there. Mr. Abhishek Sharma writes, dollar getting strengthened could be good for India given other option is China. Well, that's a very big debate. Is American hegemony better for India or Chinese hegemony? Right? American hegemony unfortunately hasn't proved to be very positive for India if you look at whatever is happening in Bangladesh and Pakistan, right? So Donald Trump's first uh, presidency, the 2016 presidency, was very, very favorable for India because America during that time had essentially stopped funding Pakistan in every way possible. And as that happened, it was very good news for India. But American strategy when it comes to India Pakistan has sort of gone back to the Obama era, right, which is not good news for India. However, I believe that America is definitely better than China because China is clearly adversarial, expansionist, right? And that's gonna be very hard for India to counter. Speaking of India China, folks, Indian defense budget, Chief of Army came out with a statement 50,000 crore rupees of deployment. He says that we are going to, and that was the capital allocation, right? The capital outlay for Indian defense. So not all of Indian defense goes into capital purchases. You know that, right? A lot of it just goes for payments and pensions and so on and so forth. And then, you know, so out of the $70 billion that India has for defense budget, $73 billion, somewhere around $10 billion or $20 billion maximum goes to capital outlay, $10 billion for foreign, and that and the rest going to research. So I have written a very deep article on it. You could check it out. Not all, a very small percentage of our defense budget goes into capital outlay, and the army chief says that that amount is going to go up, right? So this is very in line with what we've been thinking according for the defense sector of the country and the stock market. Speaking of Indian stock market, it didn't have a few good days, right? It uh, essentially had a lot of bad days, but that's supposed to be changing because of all the macros that are coming along, right? FPI situation is not really improving as of now, but people are saying that it could get better, right? And let's see how that pans out. So PSBs to standardize digital process for MSME credit, Jan Samarth portal to track lending, fetch borrower data from sources, speeding up loan delivery of up to 1 crore. So that's the plan by PSBs. Well, this has been a long time coming. India was talking about how it can improve lending to MSMEs. MSME lending is core critical to the country. You know why MSME lending is critical to the country, right? Do you have thoughts? Why is the government trying to mobilize quick dispersal of loans to MSMEs? We've talked about this enough, folks, but let's have a revision. Till then, I will pour myself some my drink, right? Anybody? Nobody? We know about it, right? The MSME play, folks. Niti Ayog, by the way, is talking about unification of MSME schemes because you know what happens? Different schemes from the government, different schemes lead to different dispersals, different decision making, and nobody knows what's exactly happening. Uh, Mr. Abhishek Sharma says they provide employment to a large sector of people. That's correct. MSMEs are the major employers of the country. Every country's economy is built on the back of MSMEs, right? But more, uh, and then he also write MSME growth directly related to Indian growth. That is correct. So most of Indian employment happens through MSMEs, right? And the if MSMEs can essentially have easier access to capital, MSMEs access to capital has always been a problem. A lot of unlicensed, unregulated, gray lending has been very prevalent in Indian MSME sector. If that gets replaced by formal credit, right? If MSME comes under the ambit of formal credit, it becomes very, very healthy for the country, both in terms of the employment opportunities, also in terms of usual formalization of Indian economy. So it's very important. uh, Capital essentially becomes more and more transparent. So capital transparency is very, very important for the country. Let's move on, folks. uh, if you remember, Vodafone was getting an AGR relief. Vodafone's AGR relief was very shocking, but that was the only way Vodafone could survive. Indian economy couldn't have survived. I mean, Indian economy wouldn't have appreciated a duopoly of Bharti and Jio when it comes to telecoms. So they needed Vodafone to survive. That's why they ended up buying about 48.99% of Vodafone, Indian government. So we are essentially the largest shareholders of Vodafone, that dumpster fire truck, right? And to save it, the government is essentially forgetting about its AGR dues and waiving them off and leading to larger payment terms and everything, right? Now, Airtel and Tata companies, Tata units and Airtel, have come out and they say we need the AGR relief, right? Telcos to pause payments due from March, weighing moving government and legal options. So that is a very logical consequence, right? If you are waiving it off for Vodafone, why would you not waive it off for uh, everybody else? So that is the concern, and that's gonna happen. Airtel and Hexacon, 48,000 crore rupees 4-year moratorium granted till 2025. Vodafone Idea Limited, of course, 84,000. Tata Group, 19,000 crores. Reliance, 1,700 crores. Reliance Infocom, the Anil Ambani Group. No, Reliance Jio Infocom, the Mukesh Ambani Group. MTNL, 12,000 crores. So if the government has forgotten about Vodafone's AGRs, right, it's gonna be a pretty big hit on the government exchequer, because this is going to be a lot of money. So we are evaluating multiple options, including a collective approach to the government, but payments will not commence under this uniform treatment across companies. And that sounds fair. That's totally fair. You know what's going to happen now, right? You know what's going to happen. Now that this is going to play out, these companies are going to unite, they're going to petition to the government. You know what's going to happen. Regardless of whether they pay or not pay, somebody's going to make money. You remember who? Would you guess who makes money, folks? I'm sure you do. I'm sure we do. You do. We've discussed about it, right? We've discussed about it enough. I'm sure you do. Who's gonna make money? Mr. Abhishek Sharma writes, lawyer. Is Airtel also expanding beyond telecom? There was news about Bharti investing in Higher India. Oh, we discussed it in the last episode, Mr. Sharma. Yes, and we discussed how Airtel wanted to be a conglomerate, and finally its conglomerate dreams might just come true with Airtel Higher, right? So they were basically, they tried their hand in FMCG, they tried their hand in a lot of other things. The payments bank thing is still working, so that can be viewed as a step. But yeah, Higher, they're moving on. Airtel, by the way, is a good buy. So if you remember, in the first episode of Thinkers Frequency Weekly, we discussed about how we wanted to pair debt of one of our viewers, right? Who talked about how there was a 12 lakh rupee debt that needs to be paired, right? 1 lakh rupee cash in hand, 1.5 lakh coming a year. So how can he pair that debt in, let's say, 1.5, 2 years? Is there a way for us to make 5x return in 1 year, right? Just as an intellectual exercise. So obviously Airtel won't give you 5x return, but it definitely will return somewhere around 35%. So 1 lakh will become 1.35 lakh rupees with Airtel in a year. right? Could it be a good time to buy Airtel stocks? Thoughts. That's exactly what I was coming at. So Airtel will definitely get some sort of relief when it comes to AGR, and if it gets that, and that's gonna pan out in a couple of quarters, right? It's gonna be a prolonged legal thing, but whenever that happens, and the anticipation of it would lead to Airtel going up. So this becomes so. Let's recap all the companies that we've talked about. We've talked about defense. We've talked about uh, something to do with the pharma, the Vigo V thing, right? The Shelly engineering thing. We've talked about uh, Satcom, something related to Satcom when it comes to, like, let's say Nelco or something of that sort, right? Should definitely write this, our tracker of predictions. Yes, absolutely. We should put it out somewhere, right? Uh, there's a YouTube play where even viewers can write posts. So let's make an Excel sheet. I'll post it there, and let's track that Excel. So we'll have everything, right? So Airtel, and that's happening. Let's move on, folks. Student loan companies feel the pressure of US visa squeeze. Outward remittances for overseas education during fall admission down 23%, 18 down during spring season, RBI data shows. Defense, semiconductor, SATCOM, and the plastics, Shelly, that was a very important pick, I guess, right? And Mr. Abhishek Sharma. I hope I'm not missing out. So this is a great idea. I'll track it down on Excel, and we our target is to grow 10x in 5x in 1 year, which is a huge target. Nobody is able to do that, but we can at least try, right? So if we try for 5x, it's possible we might double, right? We doubled our money when it came to Ether, more than doubled actually, 2.5 times in just 3-4 months, right? And that was a very, very good call. So let's see how that particular thing plays out. Let's try this, and let's share that. So I'll create a thinkers frequency sheet on Excel, and I'll put it out for view, and I'll share it on YouTube, that community post thing, and then you can add and comment, and let's do this. This is very important. Moving on, folks, because I want to be useful, right? As Scott Adams sir said, let's try and be useful. Let's move on, folks. A lot of political chit chat, which we'll not discuss. You know what happened with the cash thing, by the way? Very interesting thing happened with the cash. So, Madam Nirmala Sitharaman, some 2 or 3 years ago, told all the ATM companies that you'll have to figure out what to do because cash will go down in circulation. And as cash goes down in circulation, it needs to be seen how you pivot, right? That's the diktat she had given to the cash companies, the cash handling operators, the ATM guys, and so on and so forth, because that's also an economy, right? These people bring cash, store it. The logistics of that cash is very expensive. Then that cash comes to the ATM, then there's ATM maintenance, and so on and so forth. And that particular industry was essentially falling off the cliff as cash was going down, right? Now, what came out was that those machines have gotten a comeback. Can you guess how they got a comeback? Can you guess how ATMs have made a comeback or could have made a comeback? This is very interesting. Let's think about it. Your job as a businessman, that you ran an ATM machine, right? That was your business. How would you have pivoted with cash going down? Right? This is a very interesting case study. Anybody? Should I say it already? If it seems, if you think it's not gonna be happening, you won't be able to predict it. Uh, Let me know, because we are running short on time. It's 9:15 already, right? If you can be a little quick, I'll really appreciate that. How do you think can they have pivoted? Any thoughts? No? Nobody? So they became cash recyclers, folks. So ATM's usual construct used to be cash dispensing. Now they expanding Aadhaar service. Oh, the so Mr. Abhishek Sharma was looking at the service side of things, but they just imagine you didn't want to go in the service side, right? You just want the machine to work, right, without any service angle because that's another hassle. So what they did was they changed it from just dispensers to cash recyclers, and that sort of changed everything. Right now, you can deposit cash and also withdraw cash. So even if withdrawals don't take as much, right, they fall off the cliff. The deposits sort of make the machine much more usable. It leads to lesser trips to the bank branch for cash deposits, and it makes the machine more versatile. And as it becomes more versatile, it becomes more usable. So they're getting new orders for cash recyclers and not for ATMs. So this is a pivot, and it's worked out. And the government and the industry is essentially ordering more of such cash recyclers. Isn't it fascinating, folks? This is what you can do to avert the inadvertent death of an industry. How can I join WhatsApp group so I can get notifications about the weekly live? Well, it's there on LinkedIn. Beneath every post, I write the community WhatsApp community link, and on that link, I write it down. Mr. Barun Sharma, the class apart. Right? Let's move on, folks. Textile and apparel exports fall in the first three quarters of FY 2026. Nobody should be surprised, least of all viewers of Thinkers Frequency. We've been talking about this for a very long time. Textiles are extremely exposed when it comes to US sanctions, right? Degrowth due to continued uncertainty in US Bangladesh markets. Let's move on, folks. Power sector can fetch $450 billion in investment by 2032. 2032, 450. India's installed power capacity more than doubled over the past decade. We've been talking about how Indian power industry has been making waves, literally, right? India is no longer addressing shortages. We are managing surplus power, strengthening grid resilience, and so on. Over $345 billion in electricity generation is expected in the next 7 years. The transmission has an additional potential of $68 billion. So, electricity generation, $345 billion, and transmission, $68 billion. Over $450 billion looking at the power investment play. Can we be a part of this? Do you know any stocks or something of that sort? Right? Let me know. In fact, we'll put it out on the group. Moving on, folks. Marine exports rise. We've talked about that. Marine exports will rise, right? Because that is a super priority sector, right? Smartphone exports rose 43% to $18.8 billion, right? And petroleum products, gem and jewelry, leather, cotton, yeah, contracted. So, yeah, we've talked about the FTA progress. We've talked about, speaking of smartphone products, folks, smartphone exports. Did you know that smartphones and electronics in general, like laptops and all, they're going to rise in price? You know why they're going to rise in price? Because there's a serious rise in price happening with the memory chips. So memory chips are getting more and more expensive because of the whole semiconductor of the AI play thing, right? Memory chips have gotten a very solid price rise, and that price rise is gonna be leading to a 3 to 8%, or let's say 4 to 6% rise of smartphone prices, even laptops and so on and so forth. And as that price rise happens in the smartphone play, the smartphone volumes are gonna contract by at least 2%. Smartphone volumes are going to go down. So if you know about smartphone volumes, we've talked a lot about smartphone volumes. 150 million pieces every year, right? It's been pretty stagnant. That's gonna go down. That rose up a little, and then now it's gonna go down back. Speaking of volumes, folks, if you know, we've talked about car volumes. We talked about how car volumes were 4 million. Car volumes are now 4.49 million. In the last year, we saw a rise of about 10% when it comes to uh, the four wheelers, right? So 4.5 million is the number of cars that we are selling in India every year, right? I'm going to come to the actual numbers of the other segments, the tractors, the bikes. Cars grew faster than bikes. Could you imagine? Right? Three wheelers as well. Pretty solid stuff, right? So let's move on, folks. Moody upgrades outlook for three key Adani group firms. That's okay. Cyclical market. NBFCs face stiff competition from bank when it comes to unsecured lending. Alternate businesses. Let's move on. We've talked about this. IPOs must explain business drivers, says SEBI. That's a nothing burger. IPOs are basically free money, right? IPOs are essentially free money, and they are working like free money. People are really dealing with IPOs, SME IPOs, and all sorts of IPOs, even though people have advised them against how this market could have been jagged. People are willing to take the free money while they can take it, and that's good news, right? IPO market is not slowing down despite the Indian market not looking good, at least in the short term, right? All the prospects are green, but it's the market is still pretty much pretty lackadaisical, at least since the last week. Moving on, folks. We've talked about the bank's credit ratio. Uh, I hope I'm not missing out on anything. Mega year for IPOs in US. You know about OpenAI's IPO, Anthropic's IPO, uh, Starlink's IPO, right? So a lot of IPOs are going to happen in US. They say US stock leadership will move beyond tech, and they are moving forward with that. A lot of big, very, very big IPOs. $500 billion for OpenAI, 350 billion, $330 billion for Anthropic, $800 billion for Starlink, and so on and so forth. It's just unbelievable whatever is happening, right? But US markets are pretty green. Drug companies faring well here, but US climate not suiting them. Price pressure in US to weigh in companies' revenue. Sun Pharma Lupin may show specialty gains. Divis to fare better. I've always stayed away from pharma companies in India, right? Because even though their prospects have been green, they have been pretty green, right? But they're not an innovation stock. They're not. It's not interesting. But we should look at whatever's happening when it comes to Indian pharma, especially in the case of this, the semaglutide play. Now generics are gonna enter. The price is gonna go down. Its adoption is gonna skyrocket. A lot of people. The volumes will rise. The value will go down. The margins will get depleted because Novo Nordisk's patent will cease to exist from April 2026. A lot to watch out for, right? So let's see what happens there. Let's move on, folks. Indian IT, I've talked about Indian IT and the labor code effect on it, right? VP Country Manager Google India, Madam Preeti Lobana, has said something absolutely useless. She has said AI startups must turn pilots into scalable products. Well, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for nothing. Move on, folks. Indian Airlines are going through a tough time when it comes to the Iran conflict, right? Iran's executions were starting to happen a lot of, and India already has that Pakistan airspace ban, right? So it becomes difficult for them. Indigo, Air India, and all of these people facing some issues. Speaking of air travel, hospitality as a sector is really rising in, folks. AHG, IHG, the hotel company, Holiday Inn guys, they said we are very solid. They're investing a lot of money in here. Right, IHCL is acquiring 51% in Bridge Hospitality, a small deal, 225 crores. Hotel industry is seeing a lot of rooms. So what what the IHG head said? India doesn't have luxury hotels, uh, a luxury room capacity as much as Manhattan, not New York. Manhattan is one of the five boroughs of New York. Said entire Indian capacity of hotels, the luxury hotels and rooms, is not equal to Manhattan. So he says there's a lot of interest, a lot of uh, potential when it comes to Indian hospitality, and that's showing up. So transactions of 400 million in 2025 when it comes to mergers and acquisitions and investments and so on and so forth, up from 340 million in 2024, right? So hotel companies doing really well. Real estate developers, institutional investors actively deploy sector. Uh, APAC hotel transaction activity projected at $11.9 billion. Right? So let's move on, folks. GRAM-G will curb disparity in interstate fund flows. That's okay. High voltage energy plan. China's new loans very low. Since 2018, China has not been able to sanction loans. China's economy is showing some signs of stress, but nobody should take that too seriously. People think, oh, China's economy is going to fall out. No, no. A country which is making $1.2 trillion in cash from exports cannot flame out, right? They are the most. It's just like a person, right? Would you bet against a person who's making money hand over fist by making a product which other people are buying? No. You'll short somebody who's totally under debt, not making money, right? Spinning money, which is US. You can't short China. Ericsson is cutting jobs in Sweden, 1,600 roles. Speaking of job cuts, folks, Meta is also cutting jobs, 1,500 roles there as well. Meta is pulling back on the metaverse play. Now, Facebook changed its name to Meta because that's what it thought was going to be the future. And they made shit, man. They made losses of $73 billion in just 5 years, last 4.5 years, and now they're just basically cutting that off, right? So, not working out for them. Very weird, right? I'll just tell you a few stories which I do not want to miss from the past. So we've covered everything. We are pretty abreast with whatever's gone past us by. I'm just gonna check out on a few things, just so we don't miss out on anything, right? I'll want you to stay here and ask questions as you there. 3.77 trillion China. We've talked about that. Japanese PM happening goals. Yeah, we've talked about that. Growlicious is doing well. Revenue climbs. A tech company, $30 million. Mversity. Skill-based training and higher education play. They're still investing in these companies. Shadowfax is gonna go public. Amagi is also gonna go public, by the way. Two players. Shadowfax is coming out with a public issue of about. It's gonna value the company at 7,600 crore rupees. That's roughly $800 million, right? That's Shadowfax. Amagi is also gonna go public. Shadowfax is of course a logistics player. Amagi is what do you call it? It's basically a media player, tech support to media. So they help media companies go digital, go on cloud. They aggregate different, OTT operators and so on and so forth. So they're a B2B player. Very nice. And let's move on, folks. GCCs are coming up in smaller cities. We've talked about this a lot of times. GCCs are really heavy when it comes to tier 2 cities. They say that if we were to go in a congested city, we might just stay where we are, right? If you're coming to India, we should be having some benefits. So Mangalore and all of those places are getting GCCs. Let's move on, folks. Loan deposit. Most GCC plays only in South. That is unfortunately true. South is leading it. Although, when it comes to South, we should say that export demand, when it comes to export ranking, UP is number three. Can you believe it? UP is really rising when it comes to exports. I'm going to come out with that story. Number one is, can you guess who's number one when it comes to export? Is it Tamil Nadu? We're going to come to that. Let's not forget that story, right? We talked about FPIs. Yeah, Dixon stock, by the way, is down because of the memory chip play. Of course, Dixon is the contract manufacturer for all the smartphone companies. It was bound to suffer, right? Talked about the inflation play. Yeah, export preparedness index, folks. Exports numbers, if you look at, Maharashtra is number one, Tamil Nadu is number two, Gujarat is number three, and then comes UP. How does that sound? Exports from Maharashtra 5.6 lakh crores. Tamil Nadu 3.6 lakh crores. Number one is Gujarat 11 lakh crores, and UP is 1.72 lakh crores. It's ahead of Andhra Pradesh, and then Karnataka is at 2.2 lakh crores. Punjab 56,000 crores. So UP is amongst the top five states when it comes to exports, right? Number one is Gujarat. Number two is Maharashtra. Number three is Tamil Nadu. Number four is Karnataka, and then UP, which is pretty huge, pretty huge. Preparedness index, Maharashtra is up. This is very, very good news for UP because UP, until now, was pretty much a shithole, right? When it comes to industry, the only industrial player from UP which had done very well was which was buried under political vendetta, essentially, if you can call it that, was JP Empire. Now it's down, but UP is coming back, which is great. And a lot of it has to do with the Noida facility of Samsung, right? If you look at the macro numbers, you think a lot is going on, but then you find out, oh, smartphone exports, Apple is most of it, right? So it's very few people, but they make everything happen. Moving on, folks. Indian Auto looking. By the way, Mercedes India's numbers have fallen down. Did you know that? Mercedes, they sell about 19,000 cars. Their numbers are down. But this is not a sectoral problem. So a lot of times we feel that is this problem, is a company's problem, a sector's problem. Let's say is HUL falling down? Is it HUL's problem? Or is it Indian consumption problem? So in that case, it was Indian consumption problem. But Mercedes decline in India is not a sectoral problem because other luxury makers are coming up, right? So very interesting. Moving on, folks. Coca-Cola is going to pop a $1 billion HCCB IPO, the bottling play. Jubilant is a part of it. Jubilant recently became a part of that bottling operation. Coca-Cola is going to be going public, which is very important, very necessary, right? Yeah, so we're pretty solid. I think I've covered everything. I just want to be sure. Till then, if you have any questions, you can go for it, folks. You can go for it. We'll talk about your questions till I find anything I'm missing. We talked about auto, dark stores. They dropped the 10-minute thing, right? The quotes, 10-minute delivery proposition. Does that mean the model itself will change, or is just the promise that will change, right? Because if it becomes a slotted delivery play, if it turns into a slotted delivery play, the quick commerce thing, then they are basically leaving out the business model, right? They're changing the business model, which is going to be an extremely weird way for my prediction to come true about the segment. Quick feedback. On Thursday night, a short message like "Get ready, tomorrow" will help to have more live viewers. Well, you know what, Mr. Sharma, when we are doing the show, if I bother, so what I've got to understand and accept is that not a lot of people are going to be for thinkers frequency. It's a tough thing, right? It's a heavy thing. A lot of people don't understand it, so it's okay. But if I bother the entire bunch of like 4,000, 5,000 people that I have on WhatsApp and so on and so forth, they start leaving the group, and then it hurts my future posts, right? So I won't do that. I'll just write it on Monday. I'm sorry, in the morning. I don't care about the views and stuff, because this is now an intellectual exercise purely from let's say being useful perspective. If we can help the person pay his debt off, and then we can improve our communication style and knowledge base, and we can become better in that way. That's the core objective. Routine is the reward. There are no ambitions attached to thinkers frequency anymore, so that's cool, right? Anyway, let's move on, folks. We've talked about Amagi, we've talked about everything. Commonwealth Games and Olympics. Government set to significantly set a budget for sports. Well, that's cool, right? We've sports as a segment is getting a lot of money. Activity, the bikers, the runners. So they say that India has many runners and many cyclists, and group activities as a concept is kicking in. So we did this back in 2019-20 when I was running Spot Health. We created Delhi's largest cycling community and also the running community. We used to have like hundreds and hundreds of people beginning with cycling rallies, right? Even during winters. So that was pretty interesting, and that's sort of caught on. So my business model was built around communities and sports, and I'm happy to see that growing so fast, right? So they say we have about 2 million runners, and they're gonna rise by about 3.65 lakh runners every year. So no sport in India is growing, uh, faster than running as a concept. So nope, the model remains same. Now maybe 15-20 minutes. Yeah, you must be talking about the thing. Highways, India has second largest highway network, 1.5 lakh kilometers, roughly 1,46,000, right? Up from 291,000 in 2014. So 91,000 to 1,50,000. They couldn't double it, but that's the 10-year score. Increase of over 61%, right? Budgetary allocation is 2.87 lakh crores for 2025. And 8.3 lakh crores to be developed over the next 3 years. So a lot of money going into highways and so on and so forth. So if you look at key companies, Larsen and Tubro, that's a lot of numbers. 3,890 percentage year of change is 12% plus. GR Infra Projects, HG Infra, Delhi Buildcon, and so on and so forth. So heavy work when it comes to roads. Although the road, building has slowed down. You know why it has slowed down? Why do you think the road building has slowed down, folks? We know about it, but why do you think the road building has slowed down? It came up to 36 kilometers per day, but it's now gone down back to somewhere around 14-15 kilometers, right, per day. Our target was to reach one day reach 100 kilometers per day. We couldn't do that, but we still are pretty fast. But why it has slowed down is because land acquisition troubles compound as you go deeper, right? Sometimes the market gets saturated sooner or later, and it becomes more difficult. Acquisition issues, major projects completed. Correct, says Mr. Abhishek Sharma. Let's move on, folks. Oh yeah, the numbers. So passenger vehicles grew up December 3.28%. So let's come year on year. Passenger vehicles 5% up from 42 lakhs to 44.8 lakhs. Commercial vehicles 7%, three-wheelers 8%, two-wheelers 4.9%. So total the auto industry grew by 5%. So if you know the numbers, you've got to remember it very closely. Two-wheelers grew at 4.9. Automotive grew at, four-wheelers grew at 5%. Highest growth rate was at three-wheelers, which was 8.2%. And then came commercial vehicles. Commercial vehicles are tractors and so on. They grew at 7.7%. So it's pretty cool, pretty cool. Unfortunately, smartphones are not going to be doing that. And smartphones are also into trouble because of the PLI thing, right? 50,000 crores capital spend I told you about, the defense play. We are pretty solid. Pretty solid, pretty solid. I think we are pretty much done, folks. I believe I've told you everything there was. So the beauty is that now we are covering a week, right? And as we cover a week, the data becomes very, very dense. The stories become very interesting. And I don't like missing good stories. I feel if there are some stories that, uh, you know, even if it becomes a little longer, the show, it helps because people, when they review it, right, they can just go through all stories at once and it's going to be nice, right? So we've talked about that. Oh, yes, a very big story. Japan is going for a deep sea rare earth mineral acquisition, excavation. So, deep sea rare earth minerals. This is obviously to cut China's dependence on China when it comes to rare earths. So, Japan is leading the way. If Japan succeeds in this endeavor, India is also going to benefit because we have a very big coastline, right? So, this is going to be very, very, very interesting. In the meantime, US is actually buying stake. The government, in Trump style, is buying 150 million stake in a critical mineral company called Atalco. ATLco. If I speak it as an Indian, it'll be Atalco, right? So they bought a $150 million stake. Uh, a lot of action happening when it comes to rare earth. No slowing it down. No slowing it down, folks. Let's move on. Indian banking, some risks I've told you about. Unsecured loans, concentration of biz, that's okay. Recyclers, I told you that wonderful story. Insurance, great, great, great. Yeah, markets are choppy, we know about that. Shriram deal with MUFG, we've talked about that, so I'm not going to repeat myself. I told you about Indian IT and how the labor codes hurt them. But that's okay. Oh yeah, instant house help business, folks. The urban companies, Snabit and Pronto, those guys are book 1.4 million orders in December. Urban company is basically cornering the market with about 6 lakh 20 to 6 lakh 30 orders, followed by Snabit about 5 lakh orders, and then Pronto 1 lakh 50,000 orders. The household help market is growing up, right? But they say these leadership positions are very temporary because these people are raising a lot of money, and as they raise money, it's all gonna change. So it's basically Uber Ola level competition happening when it comes to household maid services. Could you have figured out that there would have been like a 1.4 million orders when it comes to household helps in a month? It's crazy, man. It's crazy. The monthly burn is, by the way, about $10 million, $8 million, 72 crores. That's what these companies are burning monthly. These three companies alone. So let's see how that plays out. Urban company stock. Is anybody noting what's happening to urban company stock? I think it fell, right? I think it fell. Yeah, it's down 26% from where it began. And this is a big reason because this particular industry is shaping how urban company can navigate through the crisis, because the person who cracks this instant help thing will affect the service operation. So it's the highest frequency item, right? So what happens is AC is low frequency. AC repair is low frequency. It happens once a year. Cleaning is also low frequency, deep cleaning and so on and so forth. Even beauty purchases are low frequency. They happen once a month, once or 2 months, maybe once in 2 weeks and so on and so forth. But this Insta help thing, this becomes the high frequency, inlet. So this basically becomes a customer acquisition engine for everything else. So that's what's happening with this particular thing. That's why it's so important. I'm obviously bullish on Urban Company. Uh, they're friends. Let's move on, folks. Talked about this. OnePlus India got a tax headache. So you remember OnePlus had a green line problem and green line. So they had to do a massive recall, massive warranty play. To have that play, they got a tax requirement from the government. It was about 280 crores, and they're doing a protest. They submitted 1.85 crores in protest, right? So they had a 93 crore tax requirement, tax call, and they deposit 10 crore in protest, and they say we're gonna fight it out. So why this particular tax thing? Because the recall, or let's say a warranty play, it comes under a service agreement, and if it comes under a service agreement, it has to be taxed a little differently, and that basically that customer care has backfired on OnePlus. OnePlus financials are pretty interesting, by the way. Revenues fell 13% to 12,900 crores in India, and net profits are just 16 crores, down from 230 crores. So a lot to see here, right? OnePlus, 13,000 crore company, a very big customer recall, the care thing, very weird. A lot of things happening in the movie world. Dhurandhar not slowing down. I'm so happy. I hope you've all watched Dhurandhar, because it's one movie which has essentially changed the face of Indian cinema, and for good reason. And for good reason, right? So that's pretty amazing. Browser Stack has done a buyback of $125 million, folks. Stock buybacks, $125 million. That's huge. Nearly half the proceeds to be distributed among 500 employees. That's pretty amazing. Moving on. So much of data, gets aggregated in a week. And I don't like missing good stories. Because one of my patrons, what they say? That I don't read news anymore, and nobody talks about deep news items like you, the business oriented, stock oriented, and learning oriented, insight oriented things. So if you do this, it basically becomes a very big walk for me, and in that walk I know everything. So that's pretty cool, right? State capex loan, 56% of FY26 disbursed by Jan 5. So if you know about the capex, and if you know about the fiscal deficit that the government is going to maintain, a lot of capex was front loaded this year, and by the end of the year 4.4% is the budget fiscal deficit which the government is going to maintain, and that's going to stay. Center confident of utilizing 100% capex funds before financial year end, and so on and so forth. Let's move on, folks. Obviously we are pitching in more reforms. That's solid. Nifty in a bear hug, we know. Credit demand, that's okay. Clean energy not losing momentum. Yeah. Small cars revving up on GST-led price cuts, we know. Sneaker boom had a long run. Now analysts say it's over. This is an interesting story, folks. So if you're into the world of, let's say, men's fashion, can it be called that? Sneakers had essentially cornered the shoe market in a very, very big way, right? They were from less than a quarter to around half of the global footwear sales. Sneakers had cornered like 50% of the global footwear sales. Now the market has sort of saturated, and that's what's happening with the sneaker market. Like all markets, this particular market is saturating, and people are fearing that this essentially trend will go out, right, and it starts declining. Bank of America analysts warned that future revenue growth prospects for sports footwear brands are rapidly dimming. That's bad news for Puma, Nike, Adidas, and everybody else. Let's move on, folks. Radio industry's revenue going up. RIL to invest 7 lakh crore in Gujarat across clean energy and data centers. There was a very big news around RIL. If you noticed, Reliance was looking at a very big chip manufacturing thing, right? And there was news that they had abandoned that chip manufacturing play because they were not getting access to a Chinese startup which was responsible for the core technology. And then people started criticizing Reliance on the back of this news that Reliance is a dhando maxing company and they don't invest in R&D. This Chinese startup invested $50 million for 4 years, totally invested $200 million, and they could build a technology and IP which Reliance cannot, and Reliance has like a $10 billion PAT. What kind of a shit company is Reliance? And then the next day Reliance came out and said, hey, we're not stopping this. Right? A lot of people make the mistake of comparing works in progress with finished products. So China, essentially in the technological race, is now a finished product. India is a work in progress and in initial stages. It will be very unfair for the business ecosystem to compare Chinese tech prowess with what India is doing right now. We are way behind, and what we are doing is trying, and nobody should curse us for that, right? Let's move on, folks. There was a case on X about X generated, Grok generated nude images and so on and so forth. It's settled. X falls in line. 3,500 posts and 600 accounts seized. Let's move on, folks. Space tech is pretty good. We've talked about that. Seems like we've done, folks. We've done it. Another 2 minutes and we'll be done. Right? Another 2 minutes and I think we'll be done. Yeah. Yes, folks. This brings us to the end of 203rd episode of Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout. Our weekly mental workout now. Our weekly dose of insights and analysis that don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. And now we're gonna punch in. I wish you a beautiful day personally and professionally. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you next week. Same place, same time, hopefully. Please take care. Have a great week ahead. All the best. And let's be useful. And here, let's do the last simultaneous sip in honor of Scott Adams, sir. My dear mentor. There it goes. Take care. I hope you found it valuable. I hope it felt nice. Even though the episode was long, I hope you had fun. Please take care. I should thank Mr. Eastek in, Mr. Abhishek Sharma, Mr. Bhavik Shah, Mr. Barun Sharma, and everybody else who joined. Please take care. Bye-bye.